Unless you've been living under a rock for the past few months, then you know this year marks the 20th anniversary of One Piece. And because of that, there's been a lot of special occasion things that have been released, sometimes by Oda himself, sometimes just by Shueisha, the company that publishes Shonen Jump. But one of those things are a limited edition special magazine, the One Piece magazine, released over 3 volumes. Now, at this point, all 3 volumes have been released in Japan, and from each volume, we got something rather unique from it. From the first volume, that's where we got that special what-if scenario of how Sabo showed up at Marineford and saved Luffy and Ace from getting killed by Akainu, so that was neat. And then in the most recent volume, Volume 3, we got the big revelation of Sabo's bounty, which I honestly think is a little bit low, but hey, that bounty might not account for his newfound Mera Mera no Mi powers, so maybe that's going to be updated, I don't know. But today's topic pertains to something we found out in the second volume of the One Piece magazine, also related to Portgas D. Ace, the Fire Fist, and that is the complete roster of his pirate crew, the Spade Pirates. Remember, when Ace left Fuchsia Village 3 years before Luffy did, he built up his own pirate crew called the Spade Pirates. He had eaten the Logia fruit, the Mera Mera no Mi, and he had attained a bounty of over 500 million, and he was even considered for the warlords at one point. So in just the 3-year time span from when he left the village, by the time Luffy's already leaving and messing around with Alvida and everything like that, Ace is already a very well-known pirate. So there's 3 main points that I want to cover here from everything that we learned in this little magazine article, okay? So the first thing is the entire roster of the Spade Pirates. The second thing is the backstory that we get between Portgas D. Ace and Masked Deuce. Masked Deuce was the first person that Ace met on his pirate journey, and the first person that he recruited into his pirate crew, effectively creating the Spade Pirates. Kind of like the Zoro of the Spade Pirates, kind of like, Ace's Zoro in that regard there. And there's a backstory involving both of them and how they met, as well as involving the story of how Ace obtained the Mera Mera no Mi. That's part of that story. And the last thing is also a story involving a certain Marine, an ensign officer in the Marines. So remember, ensigns are like the lowest level officers in the Marines that are allowed to wear like the cloak and everything. Tashigi was an ensign when she was first introduced at Logtown. And Asuka is kind of like the smoker to the Spade Pirates. She's like the kind of one that chases after them. She's a female Marine known as like Nailing Asuka. She uses a rapier in combat, that's how she fights, and she doesn't have a devil fruit or anything, but she's kind of the one, she infiltrated the Spade Pirates crew at one point, so I'll tell you that story when we get to that as well. So those are the 3 main points. So first, let me just go through the entire roster for the Spade Pirate crew. I'll just name off everybody that's part of it, as well as with the sketches that Oda drew accompanying them. Alright, here we go. Well, of course, first off, we got Portgas D. Ace, the Fire Fist. He was the captain of the crew. Then we have Masked Deuce, who I said was the first person that Ace recruited. I'm just gonna go ahead and say this is the first mate of the crew, kind of the same vein as Zoro with the Straw Hat Pirates. Then we have Skull, Mihar, Katatsu, who is a cat, just go with it, Saber, Aggie68, Pinnacle, Ganryu, Ducky Bree, Osmondo, Barry, Wallace, Banshee, Kukai, Dogya, Kimmel, Cornelia, Lenero, and Hublot. I love that last one, Hublot. I think that's the name of like a watch manufacturing company, right? But hey, your crew's badass when you got a guy named Hublot on it, alright? I love what he's holding, too. It looks like Oda drew him with a giant, like, pistol cannon thing. Kind of resembles that thing that that Wicked Dick used that time in that filler episode involving Zoro. Yeah, remember Wicked Dick? I remember Wicked Dick. He's just never been the same ever since Zoro cut off his dick. So that's everybody in the crew, but the only ones that are actually elaborated upon in terms of like character and their like personality and their goals and everything like that are Ace, obviously. We know a lot about Ace, Masked Deuce, and Skull. Everybody else is just kind of pushed off to the side. Now, we actually get to see a few of these members during the anime and in the manga as well, whenever the Whitebeard Pirates show up. Remember, Ace was fighting against Jinbei for like 3 days, and then they collapsed, and then the Whitebeard Pirates showed up, and that's when Ace and the Spade Pirates became part of the Whitebeard crew. We actually get to see a few members there. We get to see Aggie68, who's the big guy. We get to see Saber, who's the guy on the right with the hat, and then we get to see a guy named Pinnacle off to the left. And I'm pretty sure Pinnacle because of his name also might be read as Pinnacle, but I'm gonna say Pinnacle because there's obviously a trend here with naming your characters after like card games and stuff like Ace, for example, Ace of Spades, the Spade Pirates, Masked Deuce, Deuce can mean two, so Ace is the first, Masked Deuce is the second, and then Pinochle, which is also the name of a card game, so there you go. Not everybody in the crew is named with this kind of scheme in mind, but a few of them are, so I'm just gonna go with that. So yeah, we get to see those guys, as well as Mihar, too. We get to see Mihar there, he's the dude in the top hat. We get to see those guys during the anime, but we don't really get to know much more about them or anything like that. So, the next thing is, I'm gonna tell this backstory that was explained, where how Ace met the first member of his crew, Masked Deuce, and how he ate the Mera Mera no Mi. So here you go, just to give you an abridged version, because this is a more... You could read this whole thing on One Piece Wiki. You can go there and read the entire story, but just to abridge it for you here, we all know that Ace left Fuchsia Village, right, and he's just traveling around the East Blue. Apparently didn't have very good talents in navigation or anything like that, similar to Luffy. Although, to be fair, when Ace left, I think his ship was actually a little bit better than Luffy's. Luffy just left in a tiny little dinghy and like a rowboat. Didn't even have a sail on it. Ace at least had something a little bit bigger than that. He at least had a sailing ship, so he got probably a little bit further than Luffy. There was a desert island somewhere in the East Blue that was just uninhabited, and Masked Deuce was a guy that washed up there a few days prior to Ace did, you know? So Masked Deuce, the backstory that we get from him, actually, that's not his real name. That was a name that Ace gave him, Masked Deuce. We don't really know his real name. Apparently, he discarded it. The story with Masked Deuce is that he was a medical student, and, you know, he just didn't get along with his parents very well, and his thing is, he wanted to write, like, a great adventure story. He basically, in the same vein, you know how every now and then you run across books in the One Piece world, like in Little Garden, it was brought up, like, Bragman was that book that talked about, like, the Island of Giants and everything. That's what Masked Deuce wanted to do. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to become a great adventurer, not a pirate. He didn't want to be a pirate. He didn't want to be, like, an enemy of the world government or anybody like that. He just wanted to travel the world and write an epic adventure novel, basically, you know, an epic story, kind of in the same vein as maybe like the scholars from Ohara, maybe something like that. He just wanted to learn about the world and write a great story. On his adventures, he ended up crashing onto this island called Sixus, which is this deserted island in the East Blue, and there's like these weird ocean currents, so it's not easy to leave the island, so he was just kind of stuck there. Ace eventually gets stuck there as well. He eventually crashes his ship on the island, so Ace and Masked Deuce are now on the island together, and they don't get along very well. Masked Deuce finds out that Ace's dad is actually Goldie Roger, and he doesn't really want anything to do with pirates, and he's like, I'm not getting involved with here, and obviously you think about how much propaganda in the One Piece world is spread about Roger. Like, the second that Roger was captured, they went around and trying to kill every single person that had any kind of connection with him. You know, the world government is just saying, like, anybody involved with the Pirate King is instantly evil and deserves the execution platform just like he did, you know. So he's like, oh, you're the king of the pirates' son, I don't want anything to do with you, you know, you're probably a pretty bad guy, right? So they kind of they start talking, but then they kind of like have this little falling out, and they go their separate ways for a while, trying to figure out separate ways to get off the island. They have to build a raft or something like that. Ace tries to go about it, tries to build a raft or something, but he's not very good at it, and he's like, I'm not going to die here, I need to get off this island, I just started my freaking adventure. And time goes by, days go past, and it gets a little bit more, you know, a little bit more desperate. They're starting to run out of food and stuff like that. This is when Ace comes across the Mera Mera no Mi. He finds a fruit, and Masked Deuce is kind of watching from afar, and he sees him having this fruit, and he's like very hungry as well. He's starving, you know, just kind of a parallel between like Zeph and Sanji's backstory, how they were on that rock starving, and Masked Deuce and Ace are starving, and he sees him find this fruit on this tree, this random fruit, and Masked Deuce goes to try to kill him, you know, goes to try to attack him with like a tree branch or something to kill Ace and take the fruit, but his stomach rumbles at the last minute, and Ace notices him. So now you have the awkward moment where Ace is like, oh man, I found this fruit, and then you hear like stomach rumbling behind you, and you turn around, and this guy's like fucking foaming at the mouth with a fucking tree branch or something, ready to like jam it right in your back, like, oh shit. But Ace is a cool dude, so he just kind of like offers the fruit to Masked Deuce. He's like, oh, well, you're hungry too, do you want it? So Ace was a pretty generous guy, you know, he's always been somebody that has pretty good manners and everything, what we've seen, more so than Luffy anyway, and Masked Deuce realized at that point, this guy he's not a bad guy. Just because he's the son of the king of the pirates doesn't mean he's a bad guy. Just because he's a pirate doesn't mean he's evil or anything like that. So they decide to split the fruit. Now this is the interesting part, this is something cool, because it's been mentioned before how this works, but it's never been shown before or written about before. This is the first time, like, in the story that's canon that we we've seen how this works. So the first person to take the bite of the devil fruit is the one that receives the power. And afterwards, after you take the first bite, the fruit itself becomes like inert. It just becomes like a disgusting piece of fruit. So that's what you mean, like, you have the entire fruit. Like, you had people like Luffy and Buggy that ate the fruit whole, that, like, just chomped down on the entire thing. But you might think, well, what happens if you cut it in two pieces? You know, one person eats one person eats the other. Only one person can receive the actual power of the fruit. So it's like the essence of the devil fruit, like the power is like in a soul form contained in the fruit, and when the first person eats it, that power transfers over to the user, you know, to the new container for it, and then the fruit just becomes just a ordinary piece of disgusting fruit. So I guess in this situation, when they divided up the fruit, Ace was just the first person to eat it. It's just because they didn't know it was a devil fruit. It was just a chance of fate. Ace had probably never even seen a devil fruit before this point, because devil fruits aren't that common in, like, the 4 Seas. They're more common on the Grand Line. So, you know, Ace just ended up eating the fruit first, and then Masked Deuce had the second bite probably immediately afterwards, and Masked Deuce thought it was like, oh, this is a disgusting piece of fruit, but it's also kind of like good. It's something to put in your stomach after days of no food. It's, you know, you're very welcoming it. And then you look over at Ace, and his fucking arm is on fire, and he's like, holy shit, your arm's on fire! Like, oh my god, what? Just imagine the first time, because when Sabo ate the fruit, he knew what it was. He knew he was gonna have the Mera Mera no Mi, the fire powers. Ace had no fucking idea. Ace is on this island, just with, like, you know, like 5 or 6 days with no food, starving, eats a fruit. You know, talking to Masked Deuce, I'm like, oh man, this fruit's pretty disgusting, yeah, don't you think? Oh my god, your arm's on fire! Wait, what are you talking? Oh my god! So, that's how Ace attained the Mera Mera no Mi, and then after that, the two became good friends. They finished building their raft. They got off the island using Ace's fire powers, kind of making an earlier version of the striker ship, you know, the striker ship that Ace had that ran on fire. Using his fire powers, they basically created like a rudimentary and something to allow them to get off the island, to get away from the ocean currents, you know. You'd figure, like, even with Ace, if he had control over his power a little bit, he could make, like, a little thruster, you know. He could just, like, you know, like, okay, build a raft, you know, on the side and just all right, hold on, and then just fire off that way. So maybe something like that to escape the island, and they made this rudimentary, their first ship, a rudimentary striker, which Ace would eventually refine into an actual, like, metallic structure that he used on the Whitebeard crew in order to track down Blackbeard, that runs on his Mera Mera no Mi abilities. So that's cool. That's the story between him and Masked Deuce, and there's some other stuff involving that as well. But alright, moving on to another member of the crew, Skull, who is a guy that they also found rather early on. Skull is he looks rather intimidating, right? It looks like somebody right out of, like, the Mad Max universe or something. He's got fucking, or like Game of Thrones, like the Lord of Bones or something like that. But no, he's actually a pirate aficionado. He's kind of like Bartolomeo, except Bartolomeo was dead set just on Luffy's crew. Bartolomeo was a fanboy of just the Straw Hat Pirates, didn't really give a shit about any other pirate crew. Skull was a guy that's just a big fan of pirates in general. You know, he loved what they do. He didn't want to be a pirate himself, but he was just really just in awe of what they can do. You know, going against the world government, going out, finding treasure, living the dream, you know, that kind of stuff. So he would collect all these different pirate, like, trinkets and stuff from, like, just around his island or whatever. You just imagine he's probably going into a bazaar somewhere and somebody's like, oh yeah, Skull, this is an authentic cutlass wielded by Captain Jack Sparrow. And be like, oh really? That's crazy, you know? And it's just like a normal sword, but, you know, he collected all this pirate swag, everything that he could, skulls and crossbones, because that's, you know, Pirate Jolly Roger and everything, and then he decked him out like this. Now, when Ace came across him, this is actually really cool, because he has a lot of knowledge of other pirate crews, and the Marines as well. He knows a lot about this kind of stuff. So, he became one of the more intelligent people on the crew that, like as soon as, like, a Marine ship rolls up, he'll know, like, oh, that's Captain Hina's ship. She has the cage fruit powers, and, you know, she can do all this kind of stuff. Or it could be also, like, with pirates. Like, oh, I recognize that Jolly Roger. That's the Jolly Roger of the Foxy Pirates. We could probably take them. They're pretty easy. You know, like, he would know this kind of stuff. So he's, like, kind of like their Robin of the group, except if Robin was this big hulking dude with a skull mask on. You know, he knows the shit about the Marines and the pirates, and he'll tell them all this information. So he was very useful for being on the crew as well. So now comes the story of Asuka, who is a Marine ensign and is sort of like the Smoker to Ace's Spade Pirates, just like Smoker is to the Straw Hats, at least a little bit. So basically the deal with Asuka is at one point she infiltrates the Spade Pirate crew, and she manages to, fend off a decent amount of them. She's more than a match. She doesn't have a devil fruit. She uses a rapier in combat. She's a pretty good swordsman, swordswoman, I guess, in this regard. Same vein as Tashigi, and they were even the same rank. Tashigi was an ensign as well as she is when they were first introduced. So she takes out a decent number of the Spade Pirates. Doesn't kill them, but, manages to take them out. And then it's because of Masked Deuce's plan that manages to, fend her off. So she manages to get forced away, and she's no match for Ace herself. So it's kind of cool how it's like Smoker, when first meeting Luffy, was a Logia, and Luffy was no match for Smoker when they first met, because they just couldn't hit him. He didn't know anything about hockey or anything yet. And it's kind of the reverse here with Asuka and Ace, because Ace was the one that had the Logia, and she didn't have a devil fruit, and she didn't know hockey, so she couldn't really damage Ace at all here. So they ended up fending her off. She almost drowned, but Ace saved her. She threw a life preserver at her because Ace is an addict and is not going to let her drown in the waters, but then just kind of leaves. Now, later on, there's a moment when Ace eventually arrives at the Sabaody archipelago, right? Because they got to get their ship coded and they got to go to Fishman Island, same thing that Luffy did. So they get to the island. Oh, by the way, it was Skull was the one that actually warned Ace not to screw around with the Celestial Dragons, because he's aware of all this stuff. He knows the lore and everything, so he's just like, don't mess with the Celestial Dragons while you're on this island, okay? So Ace listens to him. Ace doesn't have an event like he punches out a world noble just like Luffy did. But he also meets Asuka on this island. And this is where he gets invited to join the Warlords. She presents an invitation for Ace to join the Warlords at Sabaody because he's already attaining notoriety at this point. He hasn't joined the Whitebeard Pirates yet, but he's very, very powerful, and she's seen that power firsthand. But Ace declines. And we also learn a little bit about Asuka's past at this point, where her village was burned down by this Navy guy named Draw, but she ended up joining the Marines anyway. So it's just kind of she's had a pretty, it's One Piece. She's had a depressing ass backstory, so she's not a bad person. So yeah, that's that kind of a similar thing that happens with Luffy and Smoker, how they started off as enemies and they still sort of kind of are, but they kind of respect each other in a way. It's like at some point in the story you are probably going to see a full-on brawl between Luffy and Smoker. It's just like, hey, look, man, I gotta do this. But it's like they're not doing it just because, you're a pirate, I gotta take you in, like, fuck you, Marines, it's more of just like, okay, I kind of respect your power, you're like my prey that I've been following, you're like the road runner to my coyote, it's like, this has to happen, we have to clash eventually. Kind of the same deal with Asuka and Ace, how they started off as enemies, but after, Ace saved her and everything like that, and Asuka told Ace about her backstory, he's just kind of like, alright, I get it, what's going on here. So they're enemies, but not really. So that's the story between Asuka and Ace there. After that, we don't get any more backstory in the magazine, but after that, we can assume, they get their ship coded, the Spade Pirates go through Fishman Island, they get to the New World, they travel around there a little while until they eventually bump into Jinbei. That's when Ace decides to take him on. Jinbei and Ace fight for 3 days straight, they both collapse. Jinbei was an ally of the Whitebeard Pirates, so Whitebeard arrives, and then that kind of brings us to where we are now with the backstory that we've already seen during Marineford, when Ace was remembering when he first met Whitebeard, how, Whitebeard came out, Ace tried to attack him, he got knocked out, he got knocked the fuck out, the entire crew tried to take him back, they got knocked out too, they got all brought up on board, the Whitebeard Pirates, they became part of the crew, and that's basically how it went there. Now, like I said, the Spade Pirates, we don't know anything about them right now in the story, but we can assume that some of them at least are still part of the Whitebeard crew, like the remnants that remain. I would imagine, Marco is now the new captain of the Whitebeard Pirates, and they got pretty beat down after the payback war with Blackbeard, so they're just probably chilling out on some random island right now, just kind of laying low. And Neko Mamushi is actually leading a search for them right now. That's where they split up at Zone. Neko Mamushi is gonna lead for the Great Marco Hunt. The Great Pineapple Hunt is afoot. So I would love to see some of these characters realized in the manga. Like, you could just imagine it now. You could see, Luffy, meeting with, Masked Deuce or Skull, or Masked Deuce particularly, because he probably knew Ace the longest, aside from, Luffy himself, and he could tell him all these stories about, Ace and everything like that, you're his brother, I will follow you, this is the story involving this, is what we wanted, But Ace's fiery passion still burns in us or something. Also Sabo. Sabo might have a role to play in this as well, where the revolutionaries might get some connection with the Whitebeard pirates or something like that. I'm not saying it's going to happen soon, but you came up with backstories for all these characters, and we don't know about them. They could still be around. So I would like to think that Masked Deuce is probably definitely going to show up at some points in the story. I would be very disappointed if in the entirety, the rest of the entire One Piece story, which is apparently going to last like 10 years. If you've seen that article written by the editor of Shonen Jump, you gotta go check out Roger's video about that. It's probably over here actually, but go watch that. But yeah, in the next 10 years or some such of One Piece, we never find out about this character, even though he's still technically alive, or most likely he's still alive and with the Whitebeard pirates along with the rest of Ace's crew, his original crew. So yeah, I mean, I love this kind of shit. I love it when they go in exposition and everything like that, because it's something you don't think about. You know, it's like we all know Ace had a pirate crew before the Whitebeard pirates, and we see them in the anime or in the manga, but we just treat them as like background characters. You know, we just look at them like, oh, these are just random characters with, you know, they gave them decent designs, like, oh, we'll just give this guy a cowboy hat, we'll give this guy like a cool weapon to use or whatever. A cat. There was a fucking cat named what was the cat's name? Katatsu. There's just a random cat on the board. Like, okay, you need a mascot. Everybody needs a mascot, right? Kind of like Red 13 from Final Fantasy VII, like this reddish cat thing, you know, whatever, you need it. Or was that a dog? I don't know, whatever. It's been a while since I played Final Fantasy VII. But yeah, so that made up his crew, and it's not just background characters. You're actually going to go through and design, character sketches for every single one, give backstories and an actual adventure. Ace went on an adventure just like Luffy did. By the time Luffy leaves East Blue and deals with Alvida and everything, Ace is already a member of the Whitebeard pirates. He's already had this massive adventure. So, hell, I'd be cool with an entire novel about this, like an entire One Piece light novel just dedicated to the journey from when Ace left Fuchsia Village all the way up to when he, met Luffy at in Alabasta. There you go, right? So it is pretty cool that we get this kind of stuff. Kind of sucks though that the magazine that we got this stuff from was a limited run, only 3 issues, and now it's over for the 20th year anniversary. But hey, maybe we'll get, when we get to the 25th anniversary, or hell, I guess even the 30th anniversary, we'll maybe get something else like this. So it's pretty cool. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and like and comment, subscribe, all that good stuff here. Here's some other videos you can watch. You can subscribe over here. There you go. Have a good one, everybody. This will be Tekking101 signing out. Later, partners.